Hi, everyone. So excited to be here today. Even more excited knowing that I'm with Dave Snell, Jason Jurado, and we were just having a brief conversation about progress and, really how to become more successful, leveraging the opportunities that live streaming, LinkedIn, and our own personal attributes bring to the table. Today's word is innovation, so it's a good time to put everybody's thinking hat on. Love to hear what everybody's insights or definitions of innovation is to make it more interactive. But we're here, chats on, want to be as relevant as possible, create as many quality takeaways. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dave, and Dave can kind of bring us up to date and also a little bit of initial thoughts on innovation. Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Good to see you and Jason again today. Feels like we were just here last week, and it's always good to have these conversations, and they get me thinking for the weeks in between our time, and I really appreciate them. Nothing much really new going on. Well, I shouldn't say nothing much really going on, but always something. With the investigations, always have someone who needs some help, and cybersecurity is going to be a fun thing that I'll get into all the time. Always looking forward to the new connections, as we were talking before we started, have connecting and getting together with people and finding new ways to help people and how they can use each other's skill sets to improve each other. And my first thoughts on innovation are, innovation is the ability in my mind to see something that you need that hasn't quite been there yet. And the first thing I think of when I hear the word innovation is Henry Ford. Two things kind of contradictory a little bit, but his quote was, if I'd asked what people wanted between a car or a horse, they'd ask for a faster horse. Well, he saw something that could change the environment in which you were working and make things easier, make things faster, make things, work a little bit better. And at the same time, his other quote that always sticks in my mind is, if I asked, what was it? Anybody can have a Model A Ford if they want, any color they want, as long as it's black. Well, okay, you just restricted me at the same time, but he was a visionary and he innovated and found new ways or used capabilities that people hadn't latched onto on a grander scale yet, and he made them bigger. Like the assembly line was not his invention, but he used it to his ability, to his success and his ability to move things faster and in ways that nobody had thought about before.
Yeah, that's so true. Jason, love to hear your initial thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking it up last night thinking about today's talk, and innovation's kind of a squirrely little definition, because it's so basic, but it's so wide. The basic definition I found is a new method, idea, or product. That's pretty straightforward. That's pretty simple. The example that I found that I really liked was talking about the telephone. So when the telephone was first invented, that was an invention. The difference between an invention and an innovation sometimes gets a little muddied. So the telephone first came out, it was an invention. Then the cell phone came out, it was an innovation because it was like an upgrade on the phone. And then the smartphone came out, and the smartphone was an invention and an innovation because it was a whole new thing, and it also built on the base. And that's something that's so important is, building on what you have already. And I think that anyone that's going to go further, to Dave's point, you have to continue to go forward. Thinking that you're going to keep getting great results from doing the same thing could be a challenge in your life. And that's something like what we do here, what you do, Don, is, this LinkedIn Live. The internet has been around for a while now, 30 some odd years, probably around there, for human, for civilian consumption. And then, social media has been around for a little bit. And now this is a new thing. This is an innovation. LinkedIn Live is something that's new and something that's going to get into the front of people in a different way. And I think it's great that, you've really taken on to that, Don, and really helping people to, not to be a commercial for you, Don, but helping people to see the benefit of using this in a way to go further and take it as an innovation. So programs like this. So I'll leave it at that for right now. I'm also glad to be here with both of you this morning. Thank you.
Well, it's always an honor and a pleasure to be with both of you. And coming from Detroit, Henry Ford has a bigger impact on me. And growing up during the golden days of Detroit and automobile manufacturing. Kind of reminds me of last week when Henry Ford's grandson invested in Michigan Central Station, which was the railroad station. I didn't even know it was the tallest railroad station in the world, 18 stories. I don't know what they couldn't have launched any trains above the first floor, so it couldn't have been more depots. And also Henry Ford created the Henry Ford Museum at Greenfield Village. And, Thomas Edison was his buddy, and actually moved the whole Edison laboratory from New Jersey to Detroit and reassembled it. And that's what Greenfield Village is. A look back at 100 years ago, and the Henry Ford Museum's got one of the largest car collections in the world. But it's the innovation of the product and then the innovation of the application, right? So LinkedIn, it created live streaming. It didn't create live streaming, but it allowed live streaming to integrate into their platform. But it's the people who then took something that was foreign or a little different than what people are used to, and then figured out how to apply it. So, there was also a story of Thomas Edison where he created, whether it was the phonograph or the dictaphone, and they couldn't sell it. Nobody had an interest in it until a salesman came along who wanted to join Thomas Edison's business and said, make me in charge of this. And he went out and created this whole marketing scheme, you might call it, to get the exposure. And I think people don't always understand how difficult is it for some people to change. Change is the hardest thing. So if you take somebody who's been riding a horse all their life and they see a car, they see a distraction or a competition to what they're used to. And a lot of people are the last people to adopt change. And some people are pioneers and get out and see a vision, understand where it could be, and have the patience and tolerance to go to course. And I think that's the key thing. If it's so innovative, it's going to take that time, but you're already going to be way ahead of the people who are the followers or the cynics. And I think part of innovation is being positive. With that, we've got Kerry, who's got his joke of the day. What's a potato's favorite horror movie? The Silence of the Yams. We also have Jatendra, who made a comment. He's out in Dubai, has about 20,000 followers. It's not showing up. So just want to recognize the people whose comments are being made. I'm kind of checking my post to see where that shows up. But this is a fascinating conversation. And it's also, and I'll switch it back to Dave, it's how innovative as a person you are also. What's your thoughts, Dave?
Well, the keynote that I wrote down while you were talking, Don, was competition, change. Many people take these as threats to their comfort, to their way of life, and their I don't want to say superiority, but I'm good at what I have already. I don't want to do something different and be brought down to a novice again and have to relearn something. And if we can look at these changes in a positive light instead of threats to our way of life and our comfort zone, then we grow. If we're going to stay stagnant in everything that we know is comfortable, we're never going to grow. So innovation allows us to build. I would just, as I'm thinking, Jason, you brought up the iPhone / apps, the smartphone transition. The problem, I don't want to be negative here, but I just want to caution with innovation comes risk to what are the threats that we don't see. And I don't want to take it just strictly down to the iPhone, but the dopamine challenge that we get from the ease of doing something too easily. Well, I have everything I need right here, but then I disconnect from everybody around me. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I just want to play both sides a little bit and say, look, yeah, innovation's great, and I don't want to forget I don't want to not take the challenge of the innovation, the threat that could be posed, and the change I have to grow from. And at the same time, I have to be aware of, what does this change in my life? What does this take away? And then you've got to look at how to grow with them together. Does that make, I
Yeah,
know it's
well, I think
contradictory.
there's a definite balance there.
Yeah,
And a lot of it has to do with your attitude and your perspective going in,
yeah,
right? If you're a doubter and a hater and everything else, that's always going to cloud your situation. Some people are diehards. Once they put a stake in the ground, they're not going to be moved for whatever reason. So, Jason, I know that you're always working with people who are looking to improve, make positive changes. How does innovation play a role in that?
I think it's a large part, and we start off with the basics. We start off with, let's get everything out of the way that's stopping you from going forward. So that's kind of where we start with. Everyone's different. Every client, every person I see is different. We're all humans, and we have that going on. But that's the gist of it. Is let's get rid of what's holding us back from innovating, to use the language that we're talking about today. Then from there, let's find the resources that we need to be able to innovate and to be able to see it. Sometimes you can't see it. Someone that's a great inventor is just someone that not only had the vision, because we all have that same vision inside. We don't dust it off. We don't excavate it, but be able to get to that point and then to use it in a way that helps us the best. To talk about, like, go back to Dave's point about innovation and then using it for what it's worth for the positive. I heard a joke, right now, AI, artificial intelligence, has been around for a lot of years, and it's been being used for a lot of years, but it's getting more traction. It's becoming more mainstream. You can't go on a social media platform right now without it saying, "Hey, I'm Bob. How can I help you?" But the reality of it is funny. Is I saw someone, it's out there, and there's different variations of it, but someone jokingly has said, I want AI to do my laundry and my shopping so I can create more art and music. Instead, people are using AI as creating art and music, and I'm doing more work. I'm doing more laundry and more shopping. So it's how you use that innovation as well. To Dave's point, being able to see both sides of it. So kind of going back and forth. But so with humans, and we deal with mental health, like I said, it's let's clear out any of the clutter. Let's clear out that, oh, well, I'm going to use this to make music and art. Let's get rid of that, and let's see the opportunities in the positive way and go forward with this new innovation.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And, sometimes, or a lot of times, you have undesirable effects through innovation because, living longer, one looks back at what used to be and what used to happen from what used to be. I know growing up, there weren't any dishwashers, right? I mean, no one had one. And what was so cool is when you had family get-togethers, the women typically would get together and do the washing of the dishes, and the men would walk over to the TV room or wherever they had a smoke or a football game. But there was so much more socialization around the dishes. The aunts and everybody would decide, are you going to wash or are you going to dry? And that gave everybody about 15, 20 minutes to catch up on all the gossip, on all the laughter. And when the dishwasher showed up, those women weren't there anymore, right? They were somewhere else. And what might help you could pull you apart from the social fabric, from the family unit. How many people are looking at their phones when they're out to dinner together? You might have just carried it out and brought it home. And people, and everything that was a time saver also became a time suck, right? If you just used the telephone to call, to relate and access people, but once you start playing games, once you start looking at social media, and there's always a funnier dog coming up or an interesting recipe, and pretty soon an hour goes by and you're having fun, but you're not moving yourself forward. You're really putting yourself in neutral. And I think discipline is going to be a key word with innovation, as well as there's going to be a competitive advantage for people who know when to stop and people who don't. So some people just get sucked in for 8 hours a day and their whole day goes by. And also, again, you forget about yourself. Maybe even you lose yourself and you become part of a group, maybe even a follower instead of a leader. All these things, and change is only going to continue. I saw some report, not to be negative, but they say AI will impact 99.5% of the population in a real negative way, because it's going to continue to figure how you respond, how you react. It continues to make new calibrations. And pretty soon you're into a puzzle that you can't really control. So the positive side is change is happening faster than others. People who embrace it, people who learn it the right way, right? Just like a car. If you don't take the time to learn how to drive it, you're probably going to get yourself in some difficulty. So I know being in the military, that probably adds one more element to being independent and adopting change relative to conforming to it. What's your thoughts, Dave?
You broke up there a little bit, but I think I've caught the gist of this. Is with the military side, real quick. I always appreciated things about the military was that we could change every 4 years, 3 years. I had a new commander, I had a new command, I had a new location. Change is always happening around us. We call it a revolution in military affairs, when new technology changes how the battlefield's going to be conducted and the operations are going to be conducted. I think I always hated change for change's sake. And at the same time, I appreciated change is happening. AI, we bring up here is one of those things that we can find it's an innovation in how we're using computer technology. It's not always for the better, and people are afraid, like you say, about losing jobs. And yet, at the same time, when you say that, Don, I can't forget the fact that a computer can't have this conversation. An AI is not going to get in this chat and have this interaction that we are on a human level. It's not going to understand how things happen. So I'm not a big fan of the economic numbers saying, hey, we've added all these jobs when 99 or 90% of them are in the service industries where there's no innovation happening or thinking. But we'll never, and at the same time, we'll never get rid of interacting with people to get information, because a computer cannot show emotion to an event. It'll never have a traumatic experience for which a therapist, a coach, a trained psychologist, psychiatrist, medical person will have a job. So we throw out numbers. I throw out 90% of whatever. There's an old joke of the stat that 80% of all stats are made up on the fly. Okay, how many jobs are really going to be taken by AI? I think the numbers are conflated personally, and I think that drives a fear in people in the society that founded or unfounded, we don't know. Why not look for the positive? Well, okay, my job now may be out, and yet I have skills a computer cannot bring. Innovation will not remove this piece of my capability. So look for those tangibles or intangibles that you bring that a computer cannot.
That's an excellent point. And I think, we have to look at what can bring us to ourselves in a better way. But more importantly, how do we come together as a community, as a worldwide community? What is creating these divisions and these distractions? And it's usually misinformation or disinformation, or someone acting out and people feeling related to them. But to really survive, the issue is not going to be outside influences. It's going to be inside influences. And I think there's a point where does morality come in? What is acceptable behavior? I know growing up in high school, if you wore jeans, you got sent home. I mean, it was a dress. It wasn't even a dress code. It was an understanding. If you had clothes that weren't very attractive and ripped up, you got sent home. And, back then there were still paddles in the classroom, and football teams, the coach would be slapping the helmets around and yelling at the kids. And now everything is like, touchy-feely in an extreme way sometimes, or misinterpretation. And if AI and all these great new inventions come to pass, who is doing that for the benefit of people? I mean, when we looked at the atomic bomb, everybody saw the benefits of atomic power, but there was also the underside of it that could make things challenging. So I think it's up to business to take a lead, and when you look around and you see companies, I know NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, you're looking at $3 trillion valuations now.
Right.
That's 3,000 billions. That's a lot of bucks that if they were spread around a little bit better, that could make a difference on population. One thing Henry Ford did beyond the assembly line that was so valuable is he wanted to make sure everybody who built a car could buy a car. So he created the $5 a day or $5, it was $5 a day that created this mass migration to Detroit, because for $40 a week, you could own a Model T. And he said, why would I build a product that everybody who's part of the process can't afford? And I think that's something important. So Jason, looking at the innovations, and there's so many, how does one stay balanced in choosing what to use, when to use it, and how to use it?
The first thing I want to say is good news, bad news. And, and not bad news in that sense, but just for the sake of, the making my point, the bad news is that innovation's going to continue on. The good news is innovation's going to continue on. You don't want to be making vinyl records. You don't want to be the best person making VCR tapes, right? Things change, things innovate, things you have to be flexible and move with it. Technology changes, and that's the reality. Now, to your point, Don, the way you do it is that, and this is my viewpoint because I'm saying it, these are all tools. Innovation are all tools. And you treat it like a tool, you'll do much better. If you treat it like it's this ominous, huge, scary thing, oh, it's going to do this and that, you might find some difficulties. But if you say, you know what, this is a tool. How do I use this tool to my advantage? How do I use this tool to not only accelerate my personal growth, but my professional growth, and on and on? It goes from there. So you treat it like a tool and not like it's some it's the Wizard of Oz. What's behind that green curtain? Who's pulling those levers? And it's just technology. It's just that. And I don't mean just in the sense, because innovation is great. It is there to make our lives better. And to both of your points, though, how we use that is what's important. We have in our we all have our little bricks with us, and there's more technology in there. What I've read is that than the computers that was able to put someone on the moon. And what do most people do with it, or a lot of people do with it? This technology. They play games. They look at the dog pictures, and I do too. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to take a break, but how do you use that tool? And that's the same way with, so these innovations, we don't want innovations to stop. We do not want to get stagnant, because what happens in stagnant water, right? We want it flowing. We want to keep that growth happening. And I've got a point for later, but it talks about how we can accelerate that. But I think the key is just that point, is innovations are basically tools, way for us to achieve our end. And I would say that on a personal level as well as I would with the professional level. How are you going to use it?
That is so valid and important. And what it does create is new opportunities, because I can see where change consulting would be a big field, right? Just being able to move people to a change they may not have been able to get there with a little bit of reference and a little bit of support. And, you know, to take the Model T example, all those blacksmiths who were watching the first car drive by, the smarter ones got a dealership, right? And the auto industry and automobiles created so many more industries and innovations than a blacksmith could have done with the horse and buggy. So, you know, sometimes it just takes a gestation period from introduction. You know, they used to say, you know, once something gets 2% market penetration, it takes off. So it was, I mean, if you don't remember, like radial tires, it took like 6 years to get there. But once it got there, it went to 8%, 15%, because the pioneers are always the ones with the arrows in their back, right? They're the ones who went forward and tested the waters or scouted things out. And once someone says, oh, the water's fine, I was just there, everybody's more willing to jump in. But now the change is happening so quickly. Right. You know, it used to be change was always on the horizon. You know, when I started my business, you know, I could see where Home Depot opened up in Atlanta and then moved to Florida. And being in Michigan and Colorado, I thought, well, it's going to be about 3 years till they get here because they had to build it out physically, right? They couldn't just go from Florida to Detroit. They would go to Atlanta and then maybe North Carolina, just keep moving progressively. Now things are coming out of left field. They're coming out so fast, and it really affects how do you make investments, right? It used to be you bought a system and it worked for 6 years. Now it becomes obsolete almost as soon as it gets out there. And, you know, when we talk about even phones, you need to be in control of your technology. When I go out with my wife, wherever we go, I tend to leave my phone at home. First of all, we already got her phone, so if somebody in the family or something comes up, they can get hold of us. But I feel liberated and in control because I don't have a temptation. If I'm going to my grandson's basketball game, the last thing I want to do is pick up my phone, and it's natural, right? There's a timeout. All of a sudden you check this, and nothing in the world's going to change in an hour, right? That it couldn't have waited for you. And it shows you're in command. Dennis has got some great comments here. Dennis is one of our best supporters. Can't thank Dennis enough. Great to see her and hear you. Glad to be here before my next live meeting coming up. You know, I mean, Dennis, 49 years in the same business, you know, heating and air conditioning. Just think of what you had to see on horizon and get prepared. 49 years, you're talking at least 7 major reinventions. 7 different pivots. And the reason why a lot of people aren't here is they stayed in the past and the future kind of overwhelmed them and took over. Dennis comes back with innovation, is willing to learn and then earn. The learning is the earning, you know, and then the additional earning is by being good at what you learned at. And so many people want to get to the end before they got to the beginning and skip the middle. And that's not a sustainable, scalable process. Comes back again with agree change is good. Let's not spare it, but happily wear it. That's a nice little rhyme. I see we're getting a lot of audience. Always happy to just see who's here and where you're from and your thoughts. Love to recognize you. So Dave, we're really getting into the nitty gritty here. Give it going wide and then compressing at the same time. What's your new thoughts?
Well, my new thought is, you know, you talk about change and how rapidly it's happening to us today. Is for some reason in the last week or two, I think it's 2 weeks, I've been stuck on watching old Perry Mason episodes. And we bring up the iPhone and having this connection to everything. And it just, as I watch these episodes, I'm just intrigued at how people got along without them. So much better. There was connection with people, and yet you could find whoever you wanted. Hey, if you have a phone service, I mean, these are businesses, and this is Hollywood. I get not everybody had access to an answering service. To hey, I'll be at Don's house. Call me if you can't find me here. Okay, you know, writing everything down and having notes and passing things, and And then you brought up the paddle. I'm going to try to make a transition to change. My daughter wanted to watch Dead Poets Society about a month ago. She had never seen it, but she'd heard a lot about it. And I said, okay. And you brought up the paddles and how that's changed. I remember, I never played football, but I can remember watching football practices and the guys being grabbed by the masks and coach yelling at them. Some pretty fresh words. But the paddle, and she looked at me, she goes, "Did they really do that?" Yeah. But we would never see that today. And the connection I'll make here is this, is I watch Hollywood. I'm a big fan of older movies and genre specific type things. And as I see actors today making movies about the 40s when they never lived that environment, they're really acting. But look at someone like Robin Williams playing back in the 50s. He lived it. So it wasn't really an unfamiliar experience because the change took so long. The things that he did in the 70s and 80s were relatively similar to Perry Mason in the 50s and 60s, or what he experienced making Dead Poets Society. So the change happened, very stagnantly through the 70s, 80s, into the 90s. And then I look at what I did at Georgia Tech for my computer classes and this big computer labs of guys who are having to write programs or write papers. And, oh, well, you only have 30 minutes because there's a line out the hall. Now my daughter goes to her bedroom and she's writing a paper and she's writing whatever she needs. It's just a quick change in 25, 30 plus years since I left college. Wow. I mean, innovation really took us in an exponential increase there. Long-winded way to say exponential increase has happened in our lifetime.
Well, and it's kind of funny because I've been watching The Rifleman lately.
Yes.
And it's only because I'm using my son's Sling subscription because all of his lacrosse games on ESPN have been broadcast, and right next to something is The Rifleman, show. And that was 62 years ago. I think it was 1961.
Yep.
You could tell the scenes were just painted on, they had a marshal's office and something else, and it was black and white, and there was no special effects. But it gained the attention of people because actors had to act. They had to really focus on their expressions, on technique, where today you get Mission Impossible with everything blowing up, every card turning over. And I think at a certain point, it creates overstimulation, right? People, innovation's good, but there's a point where enough's enough. And just like you schedule exercise or you're careful on nutrition, you have to be careful of what comes in your brain and how often and what it does. And even early on when my kids were small, I'd say around 7 and 10, I shut the TV off for 5 years, except for 5 channels. And it was kind of weird because we were one of the first people to get one of those satellite dishes with 160 channels. And I just start seeing these crazy network sitcoms and all this bad stuff, and had a little meeting with everybody and said, all of us are going to turn off everything but Animal Planet, the Food Channel, the History Channel. So if you want to watch TV, here's what we're all going to watch. I'm not going to be watching anything different. And initially you had this whole uprising, like it's not fair. I don't know what we're going to do. And I said, well, read a book, take a walk, or spend some time with yourself, right? And think about stuff. And you know what? They flourished because they had to do what older individuals had to do, is go out and feel something, play sports, find some other recreation. And it gave them, I think, a competitive edge over people whose mind just got dulled and numb over time to watch some silly stuff. And the reason I did that, I told them, is I would never give you bad food to eat. Why would I allow you to watch things that isn't going to be good for you? And as you do it as a team or as a family, everybody thinks it's fair. You can't have do as I say, not as I do type of philosophy. So, I think for those who value themselves, value their independence, value their free thought, is they don't want to get bothered. I mean, look at it this way. In a traditional office, you're doing your work and someone comes in and starts talking about stuff. And you're in the middle of what you're thinking and working on. And it's like, this is not a good time, or you're not helping either one of us. Now you have all these options where it's so easy to go to Facebook or YouTube or something else and get away from reality. And I think that's another thing about innovation is people forget their people, right? If you're playing a video game that all you do is shoot people up all the time and you're in this mode, and then you walk out the door, does that fade immediately? You're taking some level of aggression with you. You're taking some competitive thing, and you don't always know it till someone who really cares about you brings it up to you in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you're losing sight of the family, or you're forgetting to come to meals, or your mind's somewhere else. So Harry says, right now in this day and time, they need to bring back that paddle. Well, one thing about having the paddle, everybody knew the person would use it, which meant they didn't have to use it most of the time, and I think without getting away from innovation, parenting, everything I ever learned was the rule of thumb was consistency. You could be a strict disciplinarian, just make sure every time the same thing happened, the response was the same. Because then you confuse people and mix people up, and then you find, hey, he's in a bad mood, better not bring it up, wait for this to happen. And everybody's kind of gaming the system. So Jason, back to you on innovation.
Yeah, and I would just say that we have to find ways to get the results we want in different ways. And that's what we're talking about. So maybe not going back to the paddle, but maybe going back to the mindset, maybe going back to teaching discipline and honor and things of that nature, not necessarily striking people, that might not be the best way. So, but that's what we're talking about, innovation, right? Finding new ways to accomplish the goal that we want to accomplish. And that's what we have to look at. To the point that we're talking about is we're in an amazing time right now in history. The information that we're gaining every day is what they used to get in every 1 to 10 years, and within that, though, to your point, Don, we have to filter. We have to be able to filter and take a step back and look at it, because even though some innovations take time to catch on, you're talking about, the 2% and et cetera. As human beings, we like bright and shiny. We like that. We go, ooh, look at that. And we jump right into it. And then to Dave's point, maybe it's not the best thing for us, because that innovation might have a secondary gain, as we call it in my world, of getting you to buy stuff or getting you to go down this tunnel. Innovation for innovation's sake is not what we're talking about. Well, it is, but that's not the reality. We don't want to just grow things to grow things. We want to grow things that are going to take us further. I heard a quote a long time ago from the Dalai Lama, and it was kind of talking about advertising and marketing, but it says it says that it's giving you a glass of salt water to quench your thirst. And that's what some of this innovation is. It's a glass of salt water to quench your thirst. It's not going to do it. It's going to just keep you coming back for more and more and more. So if we're aware of that and we go into it eyes wide open and look at what are the benefits of this, like I said, the toolbox again, what's the benefits of this? How can I use this in a way that's going to make my life more positive, more effective, et cetera, and not just take it at face value and get sucked into these, to things that are innovation that's going to take you away from life, because it should be getting you more engaged with life. That's, I think, our biggest purpose, is to be more engaged. And so if you have a filter and just look at things analytically and say, okay, what is this? What's it giving me? What's it taking away from me? Yes, no, I think we'll be better off.
Yeah, there's hope because there's opportunity. I think the biggest challenges are institutions are being challenged because they're not as relevant as they used to be. And I know that patriotism was so big of a deal growing up, and especially with earlier generations, that people did things out of responsibility or desire to be part of something bigger than themselves. And now people are getting smaller and smaller in their viewpoint. And there's a lot of institutions that will not last the test of time. I mean, education's a key element. I mean, when you got to pay 60 grand a year to go to school and leave home and spend money there, and then you end up with a couple $100,000 worth of student debt in a curriculum of world history that isn't very monetizable, where you can be self-educated 24 hours a day. Every class out there you can almost monitor. Every great thinker has information out there. So I think, and I think that's only fair. Some people are challenged with mobility. Some people are in rural areas that don't have access. Well, why not bring the classroom to them in a way that they can decide what curriculum they want? I mean, even going back when I was in college, I took classes I knew would never have, or at least because I felt it never would, it didn't have why am I learning French? Right? I mean, I'm not, I never, and now it proves you can go to France and just speak whatever the words are and it'll translate and talk for you. I didn't have any idea that would happen. But, some things take a long time to build, and change comes and just blows it away. And now you have all this infrastructure. Now you have all these people who are directed in careers that aren't as relevant, and in the future will become less relevant. And I think that's the education system needs to teach people how to learn, how to take advantage of technology, how to make change. And, even my grandson is thinking about going to tech school. And I'm all for it. I said, we're always going to need plumbers. We're always going to need carpenters. Those will never be replaced. Who cares? I mean, any information you can access on your own through Google or YouTube. But hey, if you can learn how to use your hands, you'll always have work, and you'll always be doing something productive and creative. And it doesn't mean you have to give up the other side. You just can blend it. Instead of having phys ed, if you're not into that, why not have shop classes? I know going to school, girls went to home economics and guys went to shop, and you learned how to use a lathe, or you learned how to use a drill press or a chisel, whatever the case. And I think, that opened at least access and exposure, right? Because if someone said, boy, I love woodworking, well, hey, continue to get into it. And there used to be a prejudice or bias against people who were into blue collar.
Right.
If you weren't a white collar guy, you were less than that. And now really it's the blue collar guys that are now taking technology to manufacturing and not sitting on the assembly line doing the same thing over and over again. So, I'm excited. I'm optimistic because somehow we always know when we're at the very edge and we figure a way to back off of it, because there's some self-interest in collective interest. If everybody isn't having a meal every day, if people can't get through, well, someone's going to have to support them. And then you're going to have division, right? Because, there was a study that said, I don't know how many years ago, but like the CEO only made like 8 times the lowest paid worker in their company.
Right.
Now it's like 15,000 times. I mean, I see Elon Musk is going for a $45 billion pay package, right? And he got turned down for a $56 billion. Now here's a guy that's worth $180 billion already. To pay him $50 billion, where's that going to come from? How much benefits could have that given? I mean, and meanwhile, they're laying people off with a month's worth of severance. How do you do that and I think Elon's a great guy, done some great things, but enough is enough. How many billions do you need? How many yachts can you buy? And I think that's the question that makes people feel like they're disenfranchised, like they don't count, because it really isn't fair, in a way of saying that. So, Dave, I think we got a big opportunity here. It's like trying to.
We've thrown it all and just let it. It's gone everywhere because innovation impacts so much of our lives. And I'm thinking here, Jason, about your point of innovation for innovation's sake is not the right answer. What is the goal we're trying to reach for? And I think we don't have a national societal consensus on where we want to go, because I'm going to bring in a number of points here, and I apologize, but to your point, Don, of we've got so many narrow-minded folks, and because of technology, we just latch onto our little groups and we narrow in. We're in a kind of a malaise of the nation. I call it the boredom cycle almost. In the early 90s, we were kind of post-Cold War. We had all kinds of social issues. We didn't really know where we were going. And then 9/11, patriotism, nationalism, positive nationalism, not nationalism for its own sake. And now we've come out of the global war on terrorism. We're back to the social issue boredom. We don't have a focus of the nation. It doesn't always have to be war, but somewhere that we're trying to take ourselves technologically, socially, economically, whatever it is. We've kind of lost that. So we have technology and innovations for innovation's sake, and there's no leadership to drive us to a direction. Space race comes to mind because of Elon Musk, you've brought up a couple of times now. And he pointed out that, look, we went to the moon with enough more power than I have in calculators, much less our cell phones. And then it stopped. We didn't go back to the moon, not because we couldn't, or we didn't have the funding, whatever. The technology just kind of stagnated because the computers, even on the shuttle, were equivalent to a Commodore 64 for those of us old enough to remember those. It wasn't a whole lot. 64 kilobits of power of memory, as opposed to 256 gigabytes or 512 gigabytes in a phone. We kind of stopped, and there was really no national reason to move things along. And now we need to find that again. I'm not going to get into the political side. I don't really follow that closely as many people in these myopic worlds do. And if we have what we've done is we've thrown innovation at everybody in your face. Here's new phones. Here's new apps. Here's new refrigerators with computers in them. Why do I need a computer, that connects to the internet on my refrigerator? Okay, well, that's thrown a lot of dopamine at us, and all these new, flashy things that really stimulate our brain and have made us, I don't want to say stupid, but because that's really harsh and not the right word, but lazy and stuck and not. We have a few innovators, population-wise, small percentage. The majority of us are just kind of stuck in this dopamine loop of I'll just look at my phone, and it's the strong ones who are going to find a way to take apps off or leave the phone at home when you go out. I go back to Perry Mason. They didn't have cell phones, and yet they got everything done. And it's really funny as I watch these.
I think you froze up a little, Dave. But I did love what you were saying. Hope it comes back. I guess to kind of touch on what Dave was saying is when you look around your house, you see things that are adequate, right?
Right.
You see your toaster and it makes toast and it does just fine. But there's 20 different toasters out now. It can do more. But you're back.
Yeah. Sorry, I went off on I don't know where you lost me, so I'll just leave it at
I
that.
kind of picked up in a way, and I was just mentioning that objects are easier to deal with than information. So me and my wife always drove cars as long as they were good. And, we could afford to buy new cars, but we both drove our cars 12, 13 years until we got a new one. They were always adequate. They were as good as they were the first day. We didn't drive a lot. And the same thing with TVs. I've got TVs that are 11 years old. And I bought them when they were really expensive and weren't as maybe good as they are today, but they're adequate, and adequate's fine when it comes to objects. And I know tomorrow I can get a TV in a second if I want one, but I choose not to because it serves its purpose. And I think the challenge today is intention is not there. How could you, and I definitely am with Dave. I don't get into politics or religion. Those are two subjects that you're only going to make more friction and divisions with. If they couldn't have been solved over thousands of years, they're not going to be solved in a 60-minute conversation that we may have. But I do believe that people shouldn't feel as insecure and as inadequate as they're meant to feel. Usually it's an absolute. You're either in or out, right? You're either with us or against us. And all of a sudden we create these gangs and rivalries. And it could be in every area of life, not just politics or religion. Instead of giving people the benefit of the doubt, proposing and advocating being the better person in situations where you don't have to, or maybe you don't think you should, but it is the right thing for the other person, or it's the better thing to get through something. You don't have to agree, but you should say, hey, I understand where you're coming from, or I know what you just said. And instead of saying, I don't think that's right, because at that point, you're already putting that challenge out there, justify it or change. And who are you to get into other people's situations and not bring value? I've come up with the term lately, it's not brand new, but if there's no future with something, there's no reason to have a present with it, right? Why be into something that can't go any further or won't go any further than it is? And some people, and I think that's where another big change comes in, is people grow at different times in different ways. And you could start out exactly perfectly aligned and relatable, and all of a sudden you decide, I'm going to take yoga. And the other person says, well, I'm not. And actually, I think yoga's stupid, right? And that happens a lot, And you just say, first of all, your heart drops, because it's like, not only doesn't someone that I care about what I care about and want to support me, now they've already drawn a line in the sand, to say, I think it's stupid. And every time you do it, you kind of hear that ringing in your mind. And I think the key is going to be able to say goodbye sooner and hello faster than just continue to see things degrade in a way. And also you're holding them back, because to try and bring them in is going to either be by selling, promoting, doing something like that. And, it's like forcing a square peg in a round hole. Doesn't work well, and it's not sustainable. So, Jason, what's your thoughts with about 6 minutes to go?
Yeah, and I think we had a great conversation. This has been a great conversation, and it went where it went. Hopefully, you can hear and see me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I would like to, as we wrap up here, I would like to say that we talked a lot about, mainly about external innovation, but let's remember that internal innovation is key. And how can we find a new method? How can we get better? How can we grow as people? And I think that's key for us, and might have some internet issues right now. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, I think you did just fine, and the internet issues didn't demonstrate themselves as much. But yeah, I think that's a very quality point. is how do you use technology and innovation instead of being used by it? AI won't take over unless we allow it to take over. Everybody can make a conscious decision tomorrow to throw away whatever it is they're using and go back to the way it was. I don't anticipate that to happen. But, I think there's also an element that when it gets out there, it's really exciting. And then after a while, the excitement fades and now the reality shows up. No one's talking about the Barbie movie this year anymore, right? A year ago, it was like everywhere. So, sometimes you got to forget about the sizzle and think about the steak, because that's where the value is. And it takes maturity. Right. I think conversations like this and live streaming allows people into people's minds for an hour and also opens up their minds, because change comes slowly in most cases, and a little something that Dave said might trip something in somebody. Might be the stimulus that says, today I'm going to change because now I understand why it's important to change. They have a saying, if you got a big enough why, you'll always figure out the how to. Right. And if someone says, do this, and do this, and you'll get this, and you're pretty confident, you'll do it. It's only so many times that you do so many things and it didn't work. And it usually didn't work because you didn't work it properly or work it as long, or it wasn't something that was something important to you. One last thing, they had an example. If you had a child and it was sitting on a ledge of a building right across from you, what would you do? You'd do whatever it took. You'd run across a rope. But if someone just offered you $500 to do it, you say no way. And it just like the ladies who are 80 pounds will lift up cars when they have to, and no one knows how they got that strength. But I think people should never discount people's ability to do wonderful things, do miraculous things. We're all living on the shoulders of people who came before us, who opened the road, who opened doors, who sacrificed. And, I think people need to go back and figure out where they came from, how they got there. And, you're born with nothing, right? So everything you gain had to come from someone else to get started. So, hopefully innovation is something that people could find at different levels, at different degrees. Sometimes just knowing how to make a better hard-boiled egg is innovating, and that's always a question. How do you peel this thing without having chips all over the place? How does it come out smooth? And I've been reading about that too. And that's the fun of it, is maybe placing your bets around a lot of different areas instead of focusing on one, So with that said, what's our final thoughts and words for the day? I'll start with you, Jason. Well, I'll move it back to Dave while Jason catches up.
Yeah, I would just say that innovation is going to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. It's how we adapt to it and accept it without fear and look for the opportunities where it can help. And at the same time, recognizing, and we've brought up AI several times today, and I think it's a very important thing, innovation that we need to acknowledge. And yet, like I said earlier, AI can't replace human connection. No matter how many jobs it will take away, there are still things that people have to do by people, no matter what. I know we're running close to time there, so I'll leave it at that.
No, that's great. Jason? Well, I don't think your sound's working.
Thank you. As innovation goes, I think we also, as a community, we owe it to each other to help each other with the innovation and to learn it and to grow. Because if we don't all grow together, then it's going to be uneven. I have a client that's this is kind of a weird example, but a client that he's a contractor, he's in construction, and he does tiling. And he replaced somebody else that's kind of an old school tile person that they usually use. The plumber adjusted the shower head an extra ½ inch because this other tile guy did the old school way where you put in an inch thick membrane for waterproofing. Well, my client comes in and the new way is doing a ½ inch. So now the shower head was too long. So kind of a weird example, but I think we owe it to each other to help everyone elevate through this, and let's teach other how to use this technology.
Yeah, I think that really sums it up. And I think in finality, it's like, why not find the good in people? Why not find the good technology can bring to people and not use it as a competitive advantage and not use it as a sledgehammer? Because, we all depend on each other, whatever the case. No one's an island onto themselves. And, how can you be happy when the person next to you goes without because you took too much? And I think that's when people have to really bring that thought into mind. Is this for the common good and is it good for me? Versus, hey, I got mine, let everybody else figure out how to get theirs. And, what goes around comes around, right? So what's happening to somebody will eventually happen to you in time if things aren't done right. But I think the second finality to it is just get around really quality people who are the people that really you want to aspire to be, and people are willing to give you an opportunity to learn and grow together and shut off the rest of the world. It's just too much to deal with. And I think once you can get your tribe or your circle, work with it. More is not better until better is there. Right. And the last thing I'll say is always get better and then get bigger. Don't try to get bigger and then try to get better, because the foundation's already in place. It's hard to undo something. It's like fixing a car when it's running, getting back to Henry Ford. So with that said, I want to thank everybody. Wonderful audience. We had a huge amount of people on the show. I mean, watching it, not as many commenting, but I think that also is a measure of people listening and being absorbed in it. And so that's a credit. So come back tomorrow. Kelly will be here and we'll do it again. I want to thank Jason, want to thank Dave, just wonderful individuals to really throw the ball around and mix things up. And eventually when it all falls to earth, there are really tangible benefits because I grow every show. Thank you. And we'll thank you again.